Guys, what's going on? Welcome to Serial at Midnight. My name is Heath, and I am joined by my friend Ross for a conversation about, I don't know, what is this? Maybe the current state of Star Wars, Ross? How does that sound?
Yeah, the health of the fandom.
Oh, yeah. We're living in some interesting and exciting times because as we're recording this, Disney Plus is just days away from launching we're going to get The Mandalorian. We're a few weeks away from, what's it called? The Rise of These titles, man. The Rise of Skywalker. People watching this in 2025 are going to be like, how did he not even know the name? Still kind of new to me. Still kind of working on that name. But I don't know. It's exciting, but there's also a little bit of a... there's people have reservations, and I know, like you and I, me and Bree had the great fortune of being able to sit down over a meal about a month ago or so, and we were just kind of talking about Star Wars, and I was like, this is a conversation that I think people would enjoy. So I love Star Wars. You love Star Wars too, right?
I do.
But we're both kind of in a place where it's just more complicated now. So I think that, how do we even start this conversation? So, I've been a lifelong Star Wars fan. You've been a lifelong Star Wars fan too. Can you just tell us, like, what was your first Star Wars movie? Like, what's your first memories of the franchise?
Yeah, so I was born in 94, so dating me there. So actually, when the Phantom Menace came into theaters, I don't even remember going to that movie. I'm sure I did, but I don't really remember it. The Clone Wars was the first one I actually remember going to, but
the movie, the Clone Wars movie
in theater.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
So I was too young to really remember. I know my grandma told me she brought me, but I don't remember going to the Phantom Menace. But anyway, when we were young, my dad he's been a lifelong Star Wars fan since he was little, and I guess he was probably 14 years old or so when when A New Hope came out, and so he showed us. We were maybe 6 years old or so. He showed us A New Hope, and we loved it. And we thought it was just a standalone VHS tape, and that was that. And we watched it a whole bunch of times. Then one time we were coming home from supper, he introduced us to Empire Strikes Back, and he said, "There's a second one." And we're like, "What?" And so we kind of experienced it almost like he did. Like, we had to wait for the next one, and we watched it, and we didn't know that there was a third one. And then he did kind of the same thing with less of a timeline with the third one. And we watched those three just on repeat, the old VHS tapes, probably 15, 20 times a piece over a couple of year period. And then we go to the prequels as they're released, and those just enter right in, and we watch those just on repeat as well. So for me, I didn't notice any, I didn't have any of the prequel, I don't know, issues like a lot of people did. I was still young. I loved Star Wars. I loved what I was seeing, and it was just Star Wars to me. And so I have a very soft spot in my heart for the prequels still. Although I can definitely recognize there's certainly flaws, but yeah.
Sure. So these VHS tapes that your dad was showing you, were they the special editions or the THX versions? What editions were they?
The THX versions. Yeah.
Okay, so they didn't have all the added.
No.
Like, one of my pet peeves about Return of the Jedi is that they took out the Lop-D Neck song and then they added that Hot Blues number.
I know. I don't understand.
It's really painful. It's cringeworthy to me. Well, that's really cool, man. Your dad, like, we're gonna have your dad on here to talk about that at some point because he did it right.
Yeah. He got a little detached as the prequels came. I think he maybe thought they were a little childish at the time. I'm not really sure, but I think he started to kind of get detached. But that's when I really grabbed hold. So I took over for him.
The original trilogy generation did have a hard time. Listen, I lived through the prequels as well. I loved the prequels. I especially loved them at the time. And that's kind of where I'm at with where we're ramping up to now, because I have not necessarily been bowled over by some of the Disney decisions, which we're going to talk about. We're not going to be super negative about it, but I do want to talk about some of the things that have happened. But the prequel era was fun. It was just really fun to live through that because there was an excitement, there was an electricity in the air, and we didn't know what was coming. And like in the comics, man, every side character, like Ki-Adi-Mundi had his own comic book, and there were all these like one-shots. There were Jedi one-shots, and then there was like a Dooku story off, and you were learning things consistently that you did not know. It just really felt well constructed and well. Movies aside, not even talking about the movies, but just the rollout of these characters. I remember they put out a comic for oh, what is her name? Now, I shouldn't have even brought it up. She's a bounty hunter. She's in the Phantom Menace. She's above the pod race. She's like, "Peas." But like there was a story about her. Like we knew who she was, and then she has like a hot 2.5 seconds of screen time in the Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
And that's what we loved about it. And so it was just a really exciting time. And I don't know. Now in the Disney era, I'm kind of getting caught up in the excitement again. Every time one of these movies is about to come out, I kind of get caught up in the excitement, and it has not paid off for me as much as I would like it to. And I don't know. That's given your past, given the story that you just told us about growing up with Luke Skywalker and Han Solo and Princess Leia. How do you feel about the Disney era of stuff?
Yeah, so I was certainly pumped for The Force Awakens when it got announced and everything about it, the lead up to it. I was right there at the front, opening night, first screening, just super excited. Then I watched it and I liked it. I left the theater satisfied, at least, maybe not blown away, but I was definitely satisfied. I felt like, we have Star Wars again on the big screen. Like, this is great. We have, Marvel bought the comics. I used to read all the Dark Horse comics, and then Marvel bought the comics, and now we have all this, like, we can start from ground zero with canon. They wiped all the EU, which I didn't like, but I also wasn't as bummed as some people were. I've read maybe 20-ish books, 20, 30 books of the EU and a ton of the Dark Horse, but I was okay with the thought at first. I'm like, I understand that's a ton
Can I add?
Yep, go ahead.
I just want to add to that really quick. I've read at least, I think it's about 120 that I have on the shelf. And some of them are really good, as with all things. Some of them are really good. Some of them are seriously lacking. But it felt like time to do something with the EU because it had become so heavy under its own burden. Mm-hmm. And like in the books, Han was like in his 70s, and it seemed ludicrous at the time. Like, Han Solo can't be in his 70s in a Star Wars adventure. And then, of course, The Force Awakens. But it just felt like it was about to collapse. It felt like it was inevitable. Something was going to have to change. And when they finally, like when Disney bought it and they were like, canon, EU canon, no more. We're starting over. It was almost a relief. But then continue.
Yeah, so I don't remember I was somewhere in college, but I remember that happened, and they released the Star Wars comic #1, and I was like, well, this is sweet. Like, I can get in on #1. I'm gonna have the entire run from the beginning. I'm gonna know every single ounce of canon there is to know. I'm gonna get all the books, and it was great for a while. And I was like, this is sweet. And Rogue One came out, and it was solid. Like, I still like that one. I would say that's the one Disney movie that I still kind of be like, yeah, I'm completely fine with that. But yeah, I think what started the change, I mean, Last Jedi, I suppose that's always what people come to. That's the big divider.
It has to be, yeah.
But even prior to that, I would say the comics for me, like, there were some decent story arcs, but if you had started reading Dark Horse and some of the EU prior, and then, you're used to that, and then you jump into the Disney's canon now, and you read some of their novels, it was all, you could tell they were very careful about, they knew they were going to make something in the screen, or maybe they didn't know what they were going to make, but they didn't want anything in the books to, like, hold them, like, to some sort of canon that they have to follow. So, like, everything was very safe and very all established characters, and if they did create a different character, depending on the time in the comic, you knew that they're going to die or be very insignificant because, it was unlikely that these people were going to impact the story in any significant way. So they felt very kind of disposable. I don't know. None of the stories felt very like Dark Horse. Just seemed like I'd really get into it. I'd really be attached to something like Quinlan Vos. I got super attached to him. I loved him in the EU, and even Thrawn. Thrawn is in the new canon too, but he still is kind of a streamlined Thrawn in my opinion.
A version of Thrawn is in the new canon, but it's not
a version of Thrawn. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I noticed that prior to Last Jedi, and then Last Jedi, same thing with Force Awakens. I was there opening screening. My fiance at the time when I was done, so I could go through the emotions that was going through my mind when I was watching it, but I didn't know how to process any of it when I was watching on the screen. And a lot of people left it and like immediately posted reviews, and they're like, yeah, I mean, I think I like this movie. And then like 2 weeks later, the same YouTuber's like, oh, I think I was duped. I actually hate it. Like, and I understand that, because when I was watching it, I was watching Luke drink out of the cow, like drink that cow's milk. He tosses the lightsaber over his shoulder. Like there's just so many things that are just like, Poe Dameron's making mom jokes. There's just all this craziness happening, and I'm just like, is this Star Wars? Like, I don't really feel like I'm watching a Star Wars movie right now. And like, and I think that's where it began. And I definitely hopped on the hate bandwagon for a while. I wouldn't say I'm necessarily now actively hating everything Last Jedi, but I definitely hopped on the bandwagon for a while. Solo came out. I didn't go to opening weekend, but I did go to it. And I overall liked it. There's my biggest gripe with it is that it shouldn't have existed really ever. And Alden Ehrenreich did a decent job, but he wasn't Han Solo, and that's a tough thing to follow. Of course, Harrison Ford, but so basically, I watched The Last Jedi once in theaters and once when it came out on physical, and I haven't watched it since, and I don't know if I ever will. But I could barely get it through it the second time. I was just like, I don't know what I'm watching. Like, I feel like Disney is creating Star Wars at this point for a fan that's not me anymore. Like, I think the original Star Wars fan is not who they're interested in making these movies for, and I think that kind of offended me at such a deep level. I mean, they're free to do what they want. They own the franchise. They're free to do that, but it just got to the point where I'm like, I'm not interested in what they're creating at all. Like, it's just not Star Wars to me.
So when The Force Awakens came out, the whole talking point about that was it's the Star Wars you grew up with. It's the resurrection of your Star Wars. Prequels, like, they hid them. They suppressed them. It was like, prequels? They never happened. We're talking about 1977 and 1983. And then The Last Jedi comes out, and it totally changes the tone of the conversation. And that's kind of what you're saying, is that it's not for you. It's not your Star Wars. So who do you think that the audience is for these at this point?
I have a close friend who's super into Star Wars too. He's always been my kind of who I throw the talking points off of and see what comes back, someone else's perspective. And we've talked about that, and we're like, what? Like why? Like, what do we have to look forward to that's hopeful? Like, if this is the direction we have, like, who are they making for this? Like, is it ever going to be for me again? Like, or do I just have to change what I want? And we were saying, I think Disney, they spend 4 point whatever billion on this franchise, and their first thought is we got to get return on this investment. We have to get something coming back. So they're like, create Force Awakens, give them what they want, like put Luke, Leia, and Han in there, although Luke was more of just an idea in the movie. But give them some of that old stuff, introduce Disney to it, and so that we can start making money, which they did, and now we can create these characters that will just perpetually make us more money. But I think where they forgot in that mix is that, like, the MCU fan base is different than the Star Wars fanboys, although there's a large overlap, I'm sure. But I think people like MCU for different reasons than they like Star Wars, and Disney doesn't, I don't think, can tell the difference. I don't think they recognize that Star Wars is this kind of generational beast that's hard to tackle, and MCU is something that they probably didn't really know what they had when they created it, and they created this kind of momentum that's been building and building. But they're kind of amongst the golden days of MCU, whereas the golden days of Star Wars were a long time ago, and they're trying to like create that again. And I think it's just a different audience that's going to them, and I don't think they're recognizing that when they're creating the movie.
I definitely think they're commercial. I think that was the number one goal, is to make a product first and then a movie, a narrative second. And I don't know if you've been following the behind the scenes stories, that it was hard to get any information for so long, but now, like, Bob Iger wrote a book, and he just published his book, the head of Disney, and there's a lot of stuff coming out now about how it was handled. And it's not good. It's not upstanding the way that I've missed George Lucas in the franchise. I know that George Lucas became like public enemy number one after the prequels by my generation and the generation older than me, but I missed George Lucas in the Force Awakens. Just his whole presence, you could tell, like, the master of the creator of this is not involved in this. And he would talk about it on shows and stuff, and he would say, well, I had plans for something that was going to be challenging, it was going to be new. What I tried to do with every Star Wars movie was tell a new story in a new location, and he did, if you look at episode 4 is different from 5. 5 looks different. 6 looks different than 5. It's different tone, different color, color grading, like Return of the Jedi. Like they just have they have different unique presentations, and that carried over into the prequels too. And yes, he definitely went too far with like Senate hearings and trade disputes and things like that. I can understand that, but the core of what he was going for, look, because of those movies, we have backstory about the Jedi, we have the Jedi Council, we have Mace Windu, we have Qui-Gon. There's a lot of good stuff that came out of those movies, and it's just like he's just gone, and the person that thought up all of this is not involved in this. And then we find out, thanks to Bob Iger and his book, that he was supposed to be, and that was what George Lucas thought part of the buyout deal was, is that they were buying the company, but they were going to keep him on as the if not the hands-on executor of what was happening, he was at least going to be like the consultant, and he gave them the idea. He had story treatments for 7, 8, and 9, which he thought that they were going to be using for the script. He shows up to the script meeting with J.J. Abrams, and they sit down, and they're like, okay, so we're going to do that. Like, it was Bob Iger, Kathleen Kennedy, J.J. Abrams, and George Lucas. George Lucas shows up, he sits down, and they're like, so this is the story that we're going to go with. He's like, wait a minute, what about the story that my episode 7? They're like, we're not doing that. He stormed out of the meeting, and he never, like, that was the end of George Lucas's. Now, rumors are that George Lucas is involved now, that he has been consulted for episode 9, that he's been deeply involved in like Jon Favreau has leaned on him in The Mandalorian. Dave Filoni obviously studied with George Lucas for years doing the Clone Wars, but there is no George Lucas in these new movies, and it really feels like it. And you can't take the child of a creator and give it to other people and have it feel the same. And for me, and it sounds like for you too, that's missing. That's tangibly lost. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I to go off that just a little bit, I think their issue, like, they bring him in now, but it's to the point where we're at the third movie of a trilogy, and we have no plot lines to go off of, and we're basically like, what's the plot of episode 3? Like, what's going? Like, who is Rey? Like, she says in the trailer, like, you guys keep asking me who I am, or whatever she says. I'm like, nobody's asking that. Like, nobody knows anything. Like, there's not a single character that's really established in this trilogy. Like, some of them are likable. Like, I like Poe Dameron for the most part. I mean, I liked Finn and Rey. There's really none of the characters I disliked, except for, like, maybe Holdo. She was a little insufferable, but most of the characters I liked. I mean, but there's just nothing to them. It's just like, it's like this character that came from nowhere, and they've gotten nowhere. Like, we're still at the same place now as we were at the beginning of Force Awakens. I mean,
they're video game characters. The story is not, like, they're avatars to go through the action, and that's what these movies have been concerned with to an extent. We've gotten no real like 2 movies in, we've gotten no real revelations about the Force, no new understandings about the Force. Well, I'm gonna take that back. There is. So in spoilers, obviously, like, everybody's seen Star Wars, right? So if you're watching this video, you had, like, we're gonna spoil some stuff, but the thing that's maybe interesting is in The Last Jedi, Yoda does become he physically interacts with the environment. Like, he sets this thing on fire. That's new. It's like he's sitting next to Luke Skywalker. Yeah. So maybe they've laid groundwork. Back in the 80s, the original idea for the end of Return of the Jedi was that Obi-Wan and Yoda were going to manifest and help Luke Skywalker defeat the Emperor. But George Lucas decided that was too... it took away from Luke's hero journey. He needed to do that by himself, and it was through not fighting.
What's a hero journey?
What?
What's a hero journey? I'm kidding. I'm asking for Disney.
It's a sandwich that's, like, far away, and you have to...
okay.
But that they were going to manifest and, like, fight alongside him. And I'm just wondering, like, have they laid the groundwork for that? I'm going to be so disappointed if that's not the case. But it'd be really cool if that was groundwork that got laid in The Last Jedi.
That's kind of... Getting disappointed on theories has kind of been, like, the... really, if you had to describe my disappointment right now in a nutshell, it's that I don't think Disney really has a lot of thought going into what they're doing, and they kind of just react if people like it or something. Like, well, maybe we should do that, or like they see someone on YouTube saying something about, like, maybe they're gonna do this with the Force, like, we should do that with the Force. I don't think they're looking at lore or anything like that. They're putting this stuff on the screen, and we're hoping that they're thinking it through. And I think they're not. Like it seems pretty evident that. Go ahead.
Well, there is a story group, and Dave Filoni is on the story group, but I don't know how much sway they have over these final decisions. You can kind of tell. I mean, so J.J. Abrams directs his movie, and I don't even think he was their first choice. I think that they kind of landed on him as I don't want to say they settled on him because that sounds maybe too harsh, but I don't think he was their first choice. It seems like they went through a few people, and then they ended up with him, and then he, by all reports, he and the Lucasfilm crew, Kathleen Kennedy, they just like butted heads constantly because he wanted full control. Lucasfilm wanted control. Lucasfilm / Disney, they wanted control. So when it came time for the second one, like they started the Last Jedi before The Force Awakens was even finished.
Yeah.
So Rian Johnson is writing this movie with no idea how the one before it's going to end. It's not how you make movie. It's not how you make a cohesive story, and it's especially not how you make a story with as much lore and myth behind it as Star Wars. And I think that we're seeing that now. The question is, can they rescue it? Can they? This is the longest one of the entire franchise that's about to come out. Can it be saved? Can they put all this stuff in there and elevate the previous two? You know, our main characters haven't even been on screen really yet. They haven't shared. You know, like Star Wars Episode 4, Luke, Han, and Leia basically are in at least half of that movie together. And then they split for Empire Strikes Back. But they're constantly reconnecting and then going back off. Like, our characters haven't even been in the same scenes, really. That's a problem.
Well, and their story arcs aren't really cohesive with each other. Like, even when Han, Luke, and Leia, like, split apart, they're all working towards the same goal. But I feel like we just kind of have a random storylines going on in Force Awakens and Last Jedi that aren't really cohesive, and there's not really a lot of reason to them. And I mean, Last Jedi specifically, there's basically no plot. I mean, they're slowly flying away while the whole Casino Planet stuff's going on, which didn't matter, and like basically nothing really mattered in it and didn't really culminate.
It feels like a lot of
mattered.
It feels like a lot of character stuff, but then you start reflecting on what the character stuff actually was, and you're like, but it wasn't really. It kind of just felt like character stuff. Now, maybe there's a little bit of stuff there with Luke. I don't even want to get into it. I don't want to just blast The Last Jedi. That's not my intention, because I think there are things in that movie that I like. I don't want to be that guy. I do find where Luke is in that movie to be very challenging. It doesn't make sense to me for him to be so removed from the Force. Nothing that we've seen of Luke Skywalker would lead him to that place. But anyway, that's for another time. But it does seem, I don't know. I'm optimistic, and that's kind of where I find myself with this. Is we're on the like if that movie, I'm not getting my hopes up. I actually don't do that. I do not have expectations for movies, but I will at least try to go in and have a good time because it's Star Wars at the theater. The titles, if nothing else, I get to see Mark Hamill again. It looks like Palpatine's in the movie, so that'll be kind of cool. Ian McDiarmid back doing his thing. I don't know. There's things to maybe hopefully enjoy. What do you think? Anything?
Yeah, I certainly hope. I certainly hope that it's good, but I'm maybe more on the pessimistic side. I just don't see a world right now where they could redeem what's happened. Mostly just, especially with what's happened to Luke. Like I joke with this buddy I talk about that the only way they could fix it was like they wake up, prior to Episode 8. And they just start over, and Luke, or at least prior to Luke's demise, and they just kind of start over from there and like do something different. But at this point, I'm like, and also with the whole Palpatine, I don't know how they're going to bring him back, but it's like, what was the point of Episodes 4, 5, and 6? It culminated in defeating the Emperor. And like, if this guy's back, like, what was the point of that? What was the point of Luke's hero journey? What was the point of Darth Vader's redemption? The whole six, spoilers,
What's the hero journey?
Seasons. What's the point of Darth Vader's being the chosen one or going through this redemption that Luke like is so persistent on never turning to the dark side, this and that, and then now it's like it just kind of erases all that. So now for me, when I go back and watch 4, 5, and 6, it kind of like lessens the impact of those movies a lot because I now know that these characters go on to not be what I'm watching, and it's like if Disney would have just created their own thing. They could have done whatever they wanted, and I probably wouldn't have. I might not have been on board with it, but I definitely wouldn't have been like turning my back on Star Wars type of thing. But at this point, it's like they've ruined so much for me. They've ruined so much of what I view as Star Wars and like a world, that they've taken me out of it. It now is just a franchise and a story that someone owns. And if a franchise can just be, if a franchise is only as important as who's owning it, then it becomes not really anything more than just fiction. Which obviously I know Star Wars is fiction, but to a lot of people it's more than fiction. It's kind of a world you get into, and once you like can't suspend that disbelief anymore, then it's heartbreaking, really. Like for me, it's just really been kind of heartbreaking because I feel like I've had such like a whole lifetime of like, really being attached to this universe, and now I feel like they kind of like forced me out of it, like, and now I'm not like attached to anything going on anymore. But
and well, in a lot of ways, they have forced people out because they forced out George Lucas. They forced out all the old expanded universe. Well, Timothy Zahn is still around, but most of the old expanded universe authors have been sent off into the sunset. They've killed our legacy characters. They've killed Han Solo. They've killed Luke Skywalker can be a Force ghost, but they've killed him physically at least. So that's that. And of course, Carrie Fisher passed away in real life, so I don't know how they're going to deal with that, but that's another character. Like the characters that we loved in this new movie have systematically been taken away from us, and that's kind of a problem because it seems like there was so much that you could have done. How do you feel about The Mandalorian? Are you interested in The Mandalorian at all?
Yeah, I would have to say the trailers, out of anything else I've seen Disney do in the last year and a half or 2 years, I got pretty excited when it came out, and if anything, it made me like more upset. I'm like, dang it! It was like they have the ability, like they have the resource, they have an infinite resources, they have access to whatever creators they wanted. If they would have just taken some time and created a story from the beginning, we wouldn't be in this mess. Like they could have made something good. Like, say what you want about Disney, people have qualms with them, some people love them, this or that, but they have the ability to create greatness, and I feel like they just settle. Yeah. They just settle for producing a product that, like you said earlier, they're just creating a product, and they're not really creating a creation, which is like what I think cinema, and I mean, not just cinema, but like storytelling in general is, books, anything, comics, like if you lose the inspiration behind it, then it becomes just a product, and at that point it's going to be diminishing returns eventually. But Mandalorian does look good, but just the time period it's set in my head, this is me being pessimist, I'm like they can't do anything now. It's going to be interacting with the First Order, which is, nobody knows what it is. It doesn't really make any sense. It's just kind of like interacting in this Disney world for me that doesn't like follow any rules. It's just kind of its own thing, and so that's the main looming like sadness over it. But it does look really cool. I mean, IG-88 or whatever robot is in that trailer shooting around, and like just the ruthlessness of whoever the bounty hunter is. I have my theories, but it definitely looks. I'll be watching it, I'm sure.
Yeah, I try to go into these things with low expectations but high hopes. I really do hope for the absolute best. Hey, Jon Favreau's got a great track record with bringing some of this stuff to life. Dave Filoni, I think he directed at least one of the episodes. So there's good people behind it. I guess we're in a point now where we'll just have to see. But I am, one of the reasons I wanted to do this video now is because I am getting excited in spite of myself, just of not for the movies necessarily, not for the stuff, but just Star Wars. Star Wars is back. This is probably the last big blitz that we're going to have for several years. I think there were plans maybe for a 2022 movie, but I think that's been off the table now with the whole Game of Thrones people stepping down or stepping away. So I don't know. The lead up for me is as fun, if not more fun, than the movies themselves. The experience of these things. I got to see episode 2 at an advanced screening with I won my comic book shop was giving away tickets. And so everybody that was at that screening had won tickets, and it was just so exciting because we were seeing it a day early. Everybody had lightsabers. Everybody was dressed up. When the Lucasfilm fanfare came on, we stood and clapped. And regardless of the movie, that experience is really wonderful. So I am going to try to enjoy this last ramp up for a while. All the books that are coming out, the video game that's coming out. Hey, we finally have a single player campaign video game hitting consoles. Like almost a decade into the PlayStation 4. However long it's been. When the PlayStation, it's been a while.
It's like 8 years, I think.
Which is crazy because these video games used to be the hallmark. Like every movie that came, like, it's a new video game, and then you play the video game. But now it's just like, no, I just do multiplayer, just MMORPGs and stuff like that. But I am going to enjoy it. That's my point. Is that I'm getting excited about the return of Star Wars. Seeing Mark Hamill one more time. Maybe we'll see some Vader. I don't know. But are you excited at all? Is there any part of you that's are you still? Can I say at one point you were not going to go to see the last movie? Where are you at?
Yeah, I'm very like I'm at the point now where I'm not so much excited to see where the story goes from the point of like I want to see these things develop. I'm more of like it's almost like I want to see how the train wrecks is kind of my pessimistic view. But if that's not the full truth, I mean, I honestly deep down is like, yes, I want Star Wars to be great, and I want to go to it and enjoy it, and I want whatever I see on the screen to ignite some sort of like rekindling of the fandom. I do deep down want that, but I would say surface level, it's more of just like I'm probably gonna go the week after it opens. In my head, I'm telling myself this, but the week is gonna come of it. I'm gonna go find a ticket. And I'm gonna go, but I don't know. I shouldn't even say hesitantly excited. I'm curious. I'm more curious than excited. I'm just curious to see what happens. You know, here we are, the ninth film of the saga, and excluding the one-offs, but I don't know. There is some excitement for me in me. Yeah.
Okay. So you're not boycotting it anymore. You are gonna go.
I will not boycott it. No, I may boycott opening night, which for me is huge. So.
Yeah. We were like, I was like, well, we'll just, we weren't going to get tickets early. I was like, we'll go that weekend. It's no big deal. And then that final trailer hit, which shows nothing. There's nothing in that trailer to get excited about whatsoever. Which I'm like, hopefully they're just hiding things because they know the movie sells itself and they don't have to give us anything. But there's nothing in that trailer. But I was like, okay, I went ahead and got tickets that night not for opening night, or the pre-night, but opening day. So
yeah.
Like, they do things the night before now at like 7 p.m. Not that one, but the actual opening day. We're going to pick the kid up from school and go see it. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. Maybe we'll be back here talking about this in a matter of weeks. And we'll be like, boy, it was so cool. Ross, thank you so much for talking to me about Star Wars. I think that this is just the very edge of the can of worms that we could open on Star Wars. So maybe one day we can come back here and talk more about, I don't know, some of the books or some of the comics. There's so much stuff out there. And you are one of the biggest Star Wars fans I've ever talked to about this stuff. So you've lived it and breathed it. And for you guys watching this video, let us know what you think about it. Are you excited about what is it? The Rise of Skywalker? What does that mean? What do you think the Rise of Skywalker means? Because I have no idea. But just let us know in the comments below. As always, we'll continue the conversation and celebrate our love of Star Wars, celebrate our fandom, and this one more trip to the movies. Guys, thank you very much. Ross, thank you very much. Until next time.
Yeah.